Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So today I'm starting the first page of my brand new sketchbook. And I've decided to go to my neighborhood park to do a quick sketch on the first page. So here is my brand new sketchbook. It is another Arteza watercolor sketchbook, but this time is in a square format, a little bit smaller than my previous one. So here is the size of my new sketchbook compared to my previous one. And this one is A4 size, a tall rectangle. This one is a square format. As you can see, it's a little bit smaller on top, but the widths are the same. So I decided to try this square format because this A4 version was sold out on Amazon. So I just decided to try this large square format, which is not too small because I don't like working on super small sketchbooks. So this is a pretty good size, and the square format is really interesting to work on. Let's see how I will work in it. So yesterday I just simply wrote down a title for this sketchbook, Autumn to Winter 2021. So I'm planning to finish it by the middle of December or the end of December, in about 3 months. Because this is smaller than the previous one, it's gonna be easier and faster for me to fill up compared to the previous A4 size. It looks very inviting, all of these square pages. Okay, so here is my very minimalistic sketch materials. So here's my brand new sketchbook and my Etcher watercolor palette. Let me try to open it. So it has 24 half pan watercolors in it, way enough for doing quick outdoor sketches. And a makeup bag that contains the pens and brushes that I will use today. Very simplistic tools. So basically I just use 1 or 2 waterproof pens to sketch the line work, and then I use 2 water brushes to paint watercolors. And here I have a rag just to clean the brushes on, and everything fits easily inside this bag. And everything fits easily inside my backpack. Okay, and I actually also need to bring my portable or foldable stool. Alright, so this stool, it's foldable, it's pretty sturdy. And since I only sit on it for about 30 to 40 minutes, it's not too bad. And I also need my filming gooseneck tripod right over here. And it's time to go. The weather is really perfect for going out for a walk and do a sketch. It takes about 15 minutes to walk from home to the neighborhood park. So every autumn at this park, the trees are changing color pretty late, around the middle of October. So at the point of this video, it's still the middle of September, so there's another 1 month to wait. And I decided to sketch this view at the park. The house in the middle surrounded by trees all around. It's a really nice composition. It looks more interesting than just trees or forest. And now I'm sitting down on my stool, ready to take my stuff out. Okay, so something happened to my phone and I didn't film the first 3 minutes or so of this sketch. Okay, so here I just started drawing the outline of this tree in the foreground first, and a little bit details for the inside. Pretty simple outline. And then I drew the little tree there and then the house behind it. And then adding those windows. So now I'm keep drawing more houses beside this one. So when drawing a house, I like to start with the rooftop, then the upper part of the house, and then slowly moving down to the lower part of the house. I see buildings as very simple structures of rectangles, triangles, trapezoids for the rooftops. And now I'm connecting this tree beside the house, drawing the branches and twigs. And then gradually moving down to the tree trunk. After that, I'm adding more abstract shapes and dark spaces that I see, like windows of the houses, mostly being covered by trees and bushes behind this tree, and the rooftop barely seen. And keep adding more details for the taller part of this tree. This is pretty much like a contour of the leaves, wrapping up the branches and twigs. So just trying my best to trace what I see in front of me. So I'm doing it like pretty much like a blind contour way, barely seeing the paper, but only looking at the outline of the tree in front of me and just let the pen move on the white space. And now I'm adding the holes or the negative spaces in the tree. Keep adding more stuff that I see around the lower part. I think this is a willow tree in front of this large tree, using very simple pen lines to show the texture of the willow. So when drawing plants or other stuff in the landscape, it's really important to know and to trust your sense of how to simplify what you see. I think the goal of drawing is to simplify what we see using very simple symbolic shapes and lines. And so the drawing process should be more enjoyable. And also, we don't really have to capture every single detail that's out there. As you can see, the holes on the tree, I did not really capture every single hole that's on there, but pretty much the ones that really stood out to me. It does look like a tree. And nobody's gonna check if I included all of the leaves or the holes in it. The necessary part is the outline and the shape of the branches and a bit of texture lines to show the texture of the leaves, and that's good enough. Adding a tiny bit of detail for the house. Sometimes it takes me a few seconds to decide what to sketch next. So now I'm adding more texture, very simple squiggly lines for this tree in the foreground. And now I'm adding another shorter tree in front of this large tree. It's almost merging with this tall tree, but I'm still trying my best to trace its shape, the outline. Okay, so now I'm adding more textures and holes for this tree. Sometimes I really get into it. It's kind of like a really meditative experience that I really enjoy doing that for a while. Just seeing and then my hand reacting to what I see with very simple gesture, lines, squiggles. It's kind of like doing handwriting too. So if you know how to hold a pen and write, you can draw. I think there's no huge difference between drawing and writing. Okay, and moving downward to add a few details for the bushes there. And then some more squiggly texture lines for this shorter tree and the front. Okay, so now I'm starting to add the details in the middle. I'm using kind of a broken line to show the line of the walkway of the park. I like using broken lines because it looks more flexible and more lively. And there's a person walking. Just adding human figure there is really instantly gives a proportion to everything else. The trees look much larger now with that tiny person there walking. And just adding these rails. And now I'm drawing vertical texture lines for the bushes by the bank of the pond. Again, using very simple lines, long and short vertical lines to show grass. So it's actually not that difficult to draw the things in nature. These grass have very organic lines, so my fingers are actually very relaxed compared to drawing urban structures like skyscrapers or other straight buildings. And these organic stuff are much more relaxing to draw. And keep going. Trying to capture the spirit of the grass instead of trying to draw every single blade of grass. Nice and light. It's like they're moving in the wind. Okay, so now I'm starting to add the grass blades of the bush or grass in the very foreground. So now, as you can see, I have several layers of trees and plants now. So when sketching in nature, it's pretty important to sit down and observe the layers of plants before we really start drawing. To have a clear sense of what we are really seeing is more important than just copy what's there. We have to be aware of the layers of stuff that we see. What's being covered by others, what's in the front, what's in the middle, and what's on the back. So keep adding more simple squiggly lines to suggest the grass on the very foreground. They're much bigger, taller, and I can see the leaves on the stalks compared to those ones on the other side of the bank. This is a pretty simple idea of distance. We can see much more details of the things in the foreground compared to the ones more far away. And I find that drawing in nature takes a lot more patience compared to just drawing urban stuff, because I find nature subject matters usually have a lot of details, like bushes and trees. So it's pretty important to calm down and keep going with all of these details. For me, I find this experience to be pretty relaxing because I'm not stressing out about capturing every single detail like a photograph. I'm trying to capture the spirit of what I see using these simple gestures. If I try to copy like a camera, then it's probably going to take hours and hours and hours to finish a drawing. For this sketch, I'm planning to finish it in just about 40 minutes. Okay, so now I'm just adding a few dashes of textural details for that little tree there. And now I'm drawing this row of trees behind the houses, just the outlines. And a little bit of texture mark, that's it. Because these are in the distance, I don't need to put way too much details in it. Okay, and that's it for those details. Accentuating a bit more detail of the house over there using double lines to add a sense of shade. Adding another person walking by so that person doesn't look too lonely. So this park is actually pretty busy at some hours, usually in the afternoon after 3 p.m. There are more people walking there. And it just adding some more tiny little dotting details for the grass and now for the tree. I think that's it. That's a lot of details. And here is my finished drawing. I'm done. The drawing part. So now just taking a break, stretching my legs by standing up, and I saw these two rabbits by the bank of the pond. They're grazing on the grass. Okay, so now I'm ready to paint with watercolors. So when painting a landscape, I like to paint the sky first. Because as I mentioned before, a landscape always has many layers of subject matters. The very thing on the back is pretty much always the sky. So I just wetted the sky area first with clear water. And I just got some cerulean blue mixed in with a tiny bit of green, so it looks a little bit turquoise. I'm also squeezing my water brush on the paper right now just to dilute this blue even more. The sky is not that solid. More cerulean blue on top. If we look at the sky more carefully, the top part of the sky is more cerulean blue or ultramarine blue at the very top. Around the lower part, closer to the horizon, the color is more like a turquoise blue. Just pushing very gently and adding these colors very lightly. Sky color should be more translucent compared to the trees and bushes. So the sky is really not just one kind of blue. I was looking even deeper and I find the middle part should be a little bit darker. So now I'm adding a little bit of cobalt blue around the middle, but not adding any more layers because I don't want it to be like a pool of water, making it too muddy. Okay, so the sky is done. Now I want to paint the houses. So I just wetted the areas with clear water again, so the paint can spread out easily. It was a sunny day and these houses had a pretty bright, vibrant yellow mixing with a little bit of orange. And for the rooftop, I'm grabbing some brown. The rooftop, they're not that intense because it looks bright under the sunshine. Adding more brown yellow for the house behind. Wetting the grass area in front of the house. And now I'm gonna do some wet on wet of greens. So this is light green mixing with a little bit of lemon yellow to show the color of the grass under the sunshine. Pretty light and translucent too. I actually mix in a lot of water into the paint pigment. For the first layer, I don't want everything to look way too solid. So I'm more flexible to change the tone later with these light washes. Now for this tree, covering up part of the house, this is a mix of yellow ochre and viridian green. And this is the first layer for this tree. I'm gonna add another layer later. This is kind of like an underpainting for this tree. The sunshine color. So when painting almost anything, including the things in nature, it's good to start painting the lightest tone first that we see. So in this case, the lightest tone is a kind of green under the sunshine, the brightest green. So this first layer is pretty straightforward, just kind of like flat washes for pretty much everything, including the trees. I'm gonna add more layers of darker tones later just to show their dynamic dimensions. But right now, just relax, and for this first layer, just keep everything really simple. So I just mix in more or less yellow ochre into the viridian green to mix the different tones of green. The more yellow ochre that I put in, the more yellow green it looks. And the color is really organic. And at the same time, I'm also squeezing a little bit of my brush while the brush is moving on paper. So the tone of green is also controlled by more or less water. So squeezing in a bit more water into the green means a lighter tone of green. So the first layer that I'm painting right now is not 100% flat because every brush stroke is actually a slight different tone of green with more or less water, or a little bit different ratio of yellow ochre and viridian green. So when painting, we don't really have to stress about, making a super perfect flat wash with every single area having exactly the same color. As you can see, every brush stroke can be slightly different, and that makes the painting more lively. So there's really no need to stress about, making a perfectly flat wash. Okay, and just adding a little bit of green turquoise for the pond, which is barely showing. When I'm sitting down, I can barely see the pond. And now just adding again the mixture of viridian green and yellow ochre for the bushes in the front. And for this little tree here too. And I think that's pretty much it for the first layer. I will wait for 2 more minutes for this layer to dry a little bit before adding a second layer. Okay, so now on my palette, I'm gonna mix a darker tone of green or the shade color of green for the trees and bushes. I mix viridian green with a little bit of burnt sienna. Burnt sienna helps to make the green darker. As you can see, I'm using a variety of different brush strokes, big and small, to suggest the textures of what I see. So basically, I'm seeing, and my hand is just trying to react to express what I see using these brush marks. It's not copying, but it's more like a seeing, sensing, and expressing what I see. And this second layer painting process, just take your time and be patient. Focus on your seeing instead of rushing to finish it. So sometimes I'm being a little more careful instead of over adding a tone. And I'm not covering every single space of the first layer. Watercolor has a quality of transparency. So when we are adding layers and layers, the previous layers are not completely being covered. Always seeing through. The see-through effect is giving a three-dimensional quality or illusion to the things that we paint. So layering in watercolors is really, really important to show dimension. I'm mixing even more burnt sienna into the green so that the green looks even darker. We can also mix in a little bit ultramarine blue to help darken the green. Keep adding this dark tone all around. Here and there, different kinds of trees and bushes and plants, they have different kinds of greens. So just pay attention. Sometimes when I look at a certain plant, I feel like it has even more yellow ochre in it, or it has a bit more burnt sienna and blue in it compared to the others. It really takes time and observation skills to understand the colors we see and translate it into a mix of colors on the palette. And I'm also paying attention to the direction of the sun. I think the sun is kind of is behind me and also a little bit on the right hand side. So the left hand side of the trees are in shade mostly. So when sketching in nature, it's pretty important to pay attention to to where the sun is on a sunny day, and so we have a sense of where the bright spots are. Okay, and keep mixing and adding this shade color of green. For this tree, I'm using pretty small brush strokes, and I mix in a little bit more burnt sienna because as I mentioned before, every tree looks different, have a different tones of green. And the texture look a bit different too. Some trees have larger leaves and some trees have very small delicate leaves, and so their textures are shown differently from a distance. And I'm just kind of punching the colors on instead of just mixing with my brush. I think leaving the brush strokes is pretty important to show the spirit and to show my impression of what I see. So this is my preference of painting. I know some other artists might have a different technique when painting trees, but this is the way that I find to be interesting and to express myself best. So I'm mixing the green once a while, once the little pool of paint is used up. So every time the green looks a little bit different. Actually, every brush stroke looks different depending on more or less water it contains. So water is a really important factor to determine the tone or the lightness and darkness of colors. And now I'm adding a second layer of yellow ochre mixed with a little bit brown for the rooftop, leaving some areas from the first layer. Mix in a little bit ultramarine blue into burnt sienna or brown to get a shade color of brown for some parts of the house that is in shade. And same for the house behind. Shade color. Okay, and now it's time to see more carefully to see any other detailed color areas that I need to add on. Now I'm adding the shade color for the grass using very thin brush strokes because the shadows are squished or foreshortened because now I'm sitting down. Adding another layer of darker brown for the tree trunk and branches. And sometimes the brushwork can be so light it's barely visible, but there's still something in it added to the painting. And now I'm adding yellow ochre for the grass on the other side of the bank, using pretty thin brush strokes, not really too strong, pretty light. So we don't have to always use very strong colors. Okay, so now for the top part of the grass, I'm adding grading green mixed with a little bit of yellow ochre. This row of grass is like the bottom part is more dry or yellow, upper part is green. Okay, so now I'm painting the bushes in the very foreground. A mix of viridian green and a little bit of brown or burnt sienna, using choppy brushstrokes to suggest the looseness. And again, slow down and take your time. Keep adding the colors on. Sometimes it's good to slow down and compare the sketch and the real thing, just to feel other colors need to be added on. Now I'm adding another layer for the bushes here. Viridian green mixed with more burnt sienna and a little bit ultramarine blue to have this very dark shade of green. Just to give more dimension and thickness to the bushes. And also, the objects in the foreground needs to look very strong compared to the ones on the back, which means they need more accentuation of contrast in light and shade, so they can stand out better from the ones on the back. And now I'm adding these very small strokes of red-brown for these flowers on top of the bush, these wild flowers. So again, as I mentioned before, drawing and painting can be pretty simple. We don't need to use very complex brush marks or pen lines to create really good pictures. The only thing that we need to know is how to simplify, how to interpret the complex things that we see and simplify them into very simple symbolic lines and shapes, brushstrokes. And this is the way that we capture the essence in the impressionistic style. Adding some more red-brown around the bushes. Also, the red is standing out much better compared to the greens and browns and blues. And this gives more power to this foreground bush. It stands out better than the things on the background and middle ground. And adding final bits of color here and there. So this painting is pretty much done, and now I'm just adding some final polishes, like adding some dark shades here and there for the house in the middle ground, and keep seeing and comparing to see if there's any other important elements need to be added. A little bit red-brown for this tree here because I see the change of color in the middle of this tree here. Just a little bit of change. And some red-brown there too. This is the very beginning of autumn, when the trees and bushes are just beginning to change color. And I need to add those red and yellow browns to hint the atmosphere of early autumn. Adding some final shadows on top of the roof. The shadow comes from the tree on the right hand side on the roof. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. When I think I have enough contrast and essence of the landscape, I stop. And here's the look of my finished sketch and the real view. So this is the very first page of my new sketchbook, and it works as a title page. As you can see, I've added a title, Autumn to Winter 2021. And today is September the 21st. Actually, tomorrow is the first day of autumn. Today is the last day of summer. Wow, this year is going by really fast. And after sketching, I'm gonna walk around the park a little bit more just to get fresh air and to stretch my legs from sitting for like 40 minutes. The landscapes at this park are looking really good. Wow, it's pretty unusual to see a heron standing by the edge of the pond. I think this is the first time I've seen a heron this close, right by the bank. And there are also lots of ducks at this park. It's always relaxing to see them swimming, resting on the water. And that's it for today's video. It's much longer than usual because a lot of you have requested to see the real-time full process of my sketches. So here it is, outdoor sketch full process. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please click like and leave me a comment below. If you have any questions or suggestions, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section. And I will see you very soon next time. Have a great day.